What up guys, this is the first asynchronous class for the FRC coding class. We'll see how this goes. Just put your feedback in the Discord programming channel. But let's just get into it. So this is day 5. We're going to be covering inheritance. Quickly I'm going to cover the schedule. So this is going to be the last Java class, and then we will start FRC and robotics related programming next time. If you're not really strong on Java, I would recommend following some of the code tutorials I sent you. Or if you're decent with it, you'll probably be fine, and I'll go back and review a bit while we're working on some of the FRC robotics related stuff. Okay, so what is inheritance? So inheritance is the next step in object-oriented programming. It allows multiple classes to inherit the same methods, variables, etc. from a parent class. And so why do we use this? And the reason we use this is because in our robot code we need to force it into a really strict structure so that it makes debugging, which is like fixing code issues, and a lot of other things like that super easy, and also allows other people to kind of understand it. Once you know the structure, you know a lot of the code between robots, and it prevents repeated code. Instead of having to write the same methods in 10 different classes, you write it in one class and then it just gets inherited to the others. So let me give you a good example of that. So decent example of that. So let's say we have one parent class called car, and this stores color, weight, etc., any other variables you would need. Then there can be a subclass like SUV, sedan, truck that stores like toe strength or things that are specific to those, but instead of having to write like methods and variables for the color and weight for each SUV, sedan, truck, etc., you write it for car, and then all of the SUV, sedans, trucks inherit that from the car. So what this kind of looks like is, you can see we have the car class here, right? So we have our color, weight, and our constructor to set those variables, and then some functions to access the values of those. Now the difference, if you look at the truck class, I guess it's not a difference, this is what we added from what you would normally expect, is we added this statement called extends car. And so what this means is this class, like basically take everything from this class and plop it in here, and that's roughly what it does. And so it's extending on top of the car. So if we have a variable like weight in car right here, right, we can call truck.weight, and that'll just work like fine because it's part of the truck. But then if you notice here, we also can add our own variables that are specific to truck but not to car, like toe strength. And so now when you have a constructor for truck, you still have to input the variables color, weight for the car, and toe strength. But if you notice here, what this method does is it calls this constructor. And so in this example, it's not super useful, but if you have a bunch of code in the car constructor that you want to make sure gets run, you call this method called super, which just calls its parents constructor basically, and then obviously then you have to set your class specific variables down here, and then it adds a method like this. Then we're going to cover abstraction, and so this is another part of inheritance that makes, in my opinion, inheritance super useful. This basically is how we give structure to a lot of things. And so in the car class, for example, we can put an abstract method, and basically the abstract method in the car class won't have any code in it, but it will force the truck class, this SUV class, the sedan class to write their own code. And this is super useful because then it forces every single car to have a method that you might want in every single version of that class. And that might not make a whole lot of sense right now, but I'll try to give you a decent example. And so maybe it could be like an example. Like the car class has an abstract method called getManufacturer, and then on each the final subclass, they will kind of write out what the getManufacturer is. But one thing to take into account is as soon as I put an abstract method in the car class, now I can't make a version of the car class because there's methods that don't have code for it. So basically they're just kind of in the background, but you can never actually use them for anything besides a parent. So I added a bit of code because I couldn't really come up with a great example for this, but if you notice here, so this is the same car class we looked at a couple seconds ago. So if you notice, first what we added is this method down here, and it looks like a normal method, public string get manufacturer, but notice instead of curly brackets, there's a semicolon, and it says abstract, and basically this is not implemented here, but somewhere else it has to be implemented. And because just because we have one abstract method, we need this. So whenever you have anything abstract, you need to have this, and Eclipse will give you an error, and if you click on it, you can usually just click the little checkbox, it'll make it for you automatically. But now if I try to make a new car, it just won't let me. Same for the truck. This is just trying to give you a good example. It'll make more sense once we get into robot code, but I just made this abstract because, you know, the truck isn't going to implement get manufacturer, and so now I have another class called Tundra, which extends the truck again, and, you know, it's a constructor, and now this implements the get manufacturer. So I can make a Tundra, but I can't make a truck or a car, if that makes sense. Again, this is really not a good example, and it's kind of confusing, but when we get into the robot, we use like subsystems stuff in that. It makes it really simple. That's all. So the practice problems are at the end of the slideshow. Feel free to refer back to this. I linked it in the Discord chat, and then next class we're going to be doing an introduction to robotics. I'm just going to quickly cover the practice problem, just to make it clear. So you're going to make a class called person, and it's going to have some variables inside of it, and this is kind of like the car class where we have a parent class that's at the top of the height, and you don't really want to be able to make just a person. You want something a little more specific, and so you're going to make an abstract method inside of there, and then we're going to have a student class. In the end, you'll have two classes, and this isn't a great example, but that's it for the class. And then if you like, you could submit the code to me, and I'll tell you anything if it's good. But I just want to make sure in Eclipse, if you get Eclipse to have no errors with you making an abstract class, I feel like you're totally fine. Just because there's a couple different ways you could have done it, so I didn't want to give you an answer key and then you like, oh, let me change it. Okay, that is it for the class. Tell me how this goes.